For more on the upcoming House Speaker vote, let's bring in our political panel. With us today is Vice President of Strategic Communications at Bose Public Affairs Group, Pete Seat, and host of Can We Please Talk podcast, Mike Leon. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show. So, as we just heard, all eyes are on this big vote to take place on January 3rd. And as we heard Madeline and Griff discuss, he needs 218 votes. Let's put up those numbers on the screen here. I mean, it can't get more narrow here. He can't afford to lose but one vote. I spoke to Representative Andy Biggs in the last hour about this. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We've got one member, and actually two members, who said they're not going to vote for him. One has said under any circumstance he's not voting for Mr. Johnson. And so for Mike to become Speaker again, he's going to have everybody else. And there's a lot of discontent, particularly with what happened last week in the spending fight.
So, Pete, let me start with you. If you were a betting man, does Johnson keep the gavel?
Well, I just got back from Vegas overnight, so my betting days, I think, are over for this calendar year. But I think things are actually, believe it or not, looking good for Mike Johnson. One, here we are 6 days from the vote, and no alternative is being floated. They're not testing the waters, testing the base with another name, another potential speaker yet. You also have the fact that Mike Johnson has a very close relationship with Donald Trump. They talk frequently, they meet in person frequently. And finally is the timing. That is so critically important, not just the counting of the Electoral College votes on January 6th, but also the January 20th inauguration. Donald Trump doesn't want a messy floor fight in the House of Representatives. He wants all eyes and attention on him leading up to the inauguration and in his first weeks in office.
Yeah, that is such a good point. You really have to take that into consideration. But Mike, I want to ask you about the Democrats and, you know, what Hakeem Jeffries has said. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has said that Mike Johnson shouldn't count on him or any other Democrat this time around to help get him over the finish line. Why is that?
Yeah, Anita, good to see you first and foremost. I'd love to be in Lucas's shot right now, St. Lucia there.
Yes.
But you know, let's go back to D.C. for a second. What you just mentioned there, you know, I spoke with a few Democrats recently, including Congressman Pat Ryan on my show, and I asked him specifically about this, like, what is the strategy for 25, starting first and foremost with the speaker vote. And I think it's trickled down to the entire conference that Hakeem Jeffries has given this message of, look, we're not going to help him on this specific issue. We are going to help them potentially on the continuing resolution that we saw passed last week, because that affects federal workers, that affects employees, that affects a bunch of different things that the government needs to continue functioning at least until March, right? So they're going to help on those type of things. But on this type of issue where you can't unify your conference, they're not going to help on that. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Pete said, you know, I spoke recently with Thomas Massey's camp, and he is a hard no. I mean, I know he has said it publicly, but he's even said it privately as well. So you can't afford to lose one more vote in this. And I know the graphic just showed 4 more people that he could potentially lose. I know Thomas Massey is going to be a no. So next week is going to be incredibly interesting. But the backdrop of what Pete said, the timing of it, I don't think Republicans want this to play out again and the networks to all be covering this over the next 5 to 6 days. I think Mar-a-Lago will weigh in on this soon enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thinking, that at some point Donald Trump may come out and give some kind of a strong endorsement. And by the way, Representative Andy Biggs said he wasn't sure how he was going to vote. He wouldn't commit to anything. So we'll see what happens there. I want to change the topic for just a moment and talk about the Dems pushing back on the incoming Trump administration and this new agenda. Now, this time around, they might have to rely heavily on the federal bench, which they have been quietly stacking over the past 4 years, right? They pushed through 235 judicial nominations across the country. And, you know, those federal judges could help block some of President-elect Trump's agenda. Pete, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me be the first to congratulate Chuck Schumer for doing 1/5 of his job and getting some federal judges on the bench. Good work, Chuck. Proud of you for that. But you got to look at Democrats and their inability to read the room. They don't understand that the Trump agenda is popular. The Biden-Harris agenda, their way of doing business, is incredibly unpopular. That is in part why Kamala Harris lost, also why Joe Biden was thrown out of that race. But the Trump agenda is popular, and the American people are expecting results. So if Democrats are smart, this isn't yet another repeat of the resistance from 2017, 2018, but instead they find ways to work with Trump and Republicans on immigration, on the debt, on something like permitting reform that would decrease energy prices, decrease carbon emissions, boost domestic production and manufacturing and other things. If they were smart, they would work with Trump and not just stand in his way.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they do that. Mike, I'm going to give you the last 20 seconds here. Your thoughts on that. Wrap us up.
Yeah, well, I think there are some Democrats that have already said they're willing to work with the Trump administration. Just look at Senator Bernie Sanders. Just look at John Fetterman. Just look at the DOJ committee and what Ro Khanna and Representative Jared Moskowitz has said about joining it. I know lifting the SALT tax, a lot of members of Congress that I've talked to have all said that they would work with the Trump administration on that. So I think you're seeing a little bit of Democrats starting to placate, to that, and they want to work with the incoming administration because what Pete said overall, this is an edict from the country. 77 million people voted for the president-elect Trump.
Yeah, we are in for interesting times ahead, and who knows, maybe some bipartisanship, right?